This weekend saw the release of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, or Dune, if you will. That joke probably works better in text, and I apologize to all of our French audience. Still, we thought it was worth taking a look back at Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, so consider this a spoiler warning. We will be talking about the first film in its entirety, and the larger themes of the book series on which it's based. With that in mind, let's get Dune to business. I would like to apologize to all of our Scottish viewers.
Damn Scots! They ruined Scotland!
If one were to pick an adjective to describe Denis Villeneuve's Dune, it would probably be big. I mean, that's the kind of professional insight that you come here for, right? Dune is a triumph of scale and spectacle. It's an epic in every sense of that word. A science fantasy adventure that conveys a sense of scope. It's a movie that is designed to be seen on as big a screen as possible, with Villeneuve even formatting it for IMAX. But watching the film on any screen conveys a sense of majesty that's rare in modern blockbuster cinema. There is perhaps a tendency to over-intellectualize a statement like, Dune is big. But look, we're gonna be talking about Dune for the next 10 minutes, so you can bear with me, and at the very least this video is gonna look cool. Thanks, Jesse. There's obviously a lot to talk about with Dune. It's a rich thematic text that grapples with big ideas like religion, colonialism, predetermination, power, and violence. There's a lot to discuss even within the opening minutes of the film, which make a number of bold adaptational choices. For example, the movie shifts the narration from Princess Irulan to the indigenous Chani. The first glimpse of an outworlder that we see is the whip on Beast Raban's belt, telling us that this will be a story about colonial violence. Villeneuve even makes sure that the first face to appear on screen is Jamis, the indigenous warrior who will be the first of many to be killed by our hero, Paul. All of that is within the first 2 minutes of screen time. However, since this is a video essay, we thought we'd take a look at the film's visual storytelling. How director Denis Villeneuve and cinematographer Greg Fraser used the film's sense of size to illuminate its underlying themes. Dune is adapting infamously dense source material to the point that Frank Herbert might as well have named the novel for the sound that it makes when you drop it on a table. Villeneuve and Fraser communicate many of the story's key themes visually, rather than relying on exposition or dialogue. This is part of what makes it a great adaptation. It doesn't feel overly theatrical.
Frankly, I hate dialogue. I don't remember movies because of a good line. I remember movies because of a strong image. I'm not interested in dialogue at all. Pure image and sound, that is the power of cinema. But it is something not obvious when you watch movies today.
One of the film's key recurring visual motifs is the idea of scale. Villeneuve doesn't just use wide shots to introduce new scenes or to orient the audience in particular spaces. He'll often cut to a wide shot in the middle of a larger scene to reinforce that idea of size. Dune constantly reminds its audience how small its characters are in the grand scheme of things, dwarfed by the natural environments around them, but also by the man-made structures that they've built. To a certain extent, this is just good visual storytelling in that it helps to ground the audience in this fantastical universe. The audience has a good idea of how large the average person is, so putting people next to large objects like, say, a spaceship, or a sandworm, or a wild roaming Jason Momoa helps give a sense of how large these objects are. It creates a frame of reference. However, it also works in reverse. We know how big these objects are, but we also know how small human beings are, at least within the world of Dune. It's worth considering how Villeneuve introduces the sandworm, perhaps the most iconic part of Dune lore.
It was big! It was all wiggly! And it ate everything!
The movie follows the rule of 3, teasing the worm's appearance twice before finally showing it. In the first scene, Villeneuve shows Paul and Gurney dwarfed by the spice harvester before revealing how much bigger the sandworm must be. In the first 2 encounters, the worm is too big to appear fully on screen, almost too large to be contained even within the IMAX frame. Indeed, there's a shot that Villeneuve returns to time and again, in which a character is introduced close to the camera, only to peer over a ledge and witness the true scale of what is unfolding. It creates a compelling contrast between something recognizable and something that exists almost beyond the audience's frame of reference. It's Villeneuve's riff on the, and let me check the Amazon Prime Twitter account here, the Christopher Nolan back shot. It's the kind of shot that makes film nerds really horny. However, this isn't just a cool shot and some good visual storytelling, it's also core to the themes of Dune. Dune is a story about powerful rulers, barons, dukes, and emperors. However, it's more fundamentally a story about systems and structures. As author Frank Herbert explained, heroes are painful, superheroes are a catastrophe. It is the systems themselves that I see as dangerous. Systemic is a deadly word. Systems originate with human creators, with people who employ them. Systems take over and grind on and on. They are like a flood tide that picks up everything in its path. Villeneuve and Fraser visualize those systems and structures very literally, Most of the movie's interiors, like hangar bays, dining rooms, or even corridors, are gigantic. You could, literally march an army through them. I know that because Villeneuve literally marches an army through them. Villeneuve often composes shots in such a way as to emphasize these spaces. Paul Atreides, our hero, is often framed to appear small and isolated in these larger surroundings, even when accompanied by other characters, and even when standing in spaces that should be safe and familiar. Dune is a story about the characters caught in the path of those structures, realizing that no amount of power can free an individual from the larger systems around them. Consider the character of Duke Leto Atreides, Paul's father and the popular ruler of the planet Caladan, who is gifted control of the planet Arrakis. In reality, the gift is a trap. It's a plot masterminded by the Emperor, who sees Leto as a potential political rival to be eliminated. For all his power, Leto cannot escape that fate. His fate is literally sealed 10 minutes into the film.
So, it's done. It's done.
And again, to underscore the importance of visual storytelling, that's not a metaphor, it is a literal seal. The inevitability of Leto's death haunts Dune. The character's first real conversation with his son Paul takes place in a graveyard, by the memorial to Leto's own deceased father. Leto's father was obviously also the Duke. He used to enjoy fighting bulls recreationally and was killed in a freak accident. This event is only fleetingly referenced in dialogue, but the bull imagery haunts the movie, a reminder of the mortality of the men who rule House Atreides, and how fragile human life can be when confronted with something more animalistic. The bull is just one example of the animal imagery that recurs throughout Dune. The film places a great deal of emphasis on the importance of humanity, suggesting that there is an innate quality that separates human beings from these creatures. The Reverend Mother tests Paul to ensure that he is human.
Like sifting sand through a screen, we sift people.
House Atreides advisor Gurney Halleck argues that the Harkonnens are less than human.
They're not human, they're brutal!
In the world of Dune, even the technology is designed to suggest something animalistic. Ornithopters fly like dragonflies, hunter-seeker probes look like mosquitoes, and the Harkonnen spice harvesters feed on the planet like giant ticks. Even characters are marked and branded like chattel. The lip tattoos on Peter DeVries and Thufir Hawat marks them as mentats. The diamond brand on Dr. Wellington Yue's head reflects his Imperial programming. The film doesn't explain through dialogue the lore behind these tattoos unless you've read the book, but the audience watching in the cinema can understand visually what it means to mark another person in such a way, to suggest that they are not seen as full human beings but are instead property. Dune suggests that humanity is a virtue that Paul cannot afford. Arrakis is not a forgiving world, particularly to those who demonstrate compassion and empathy. It seems like only animals can survive these tests.
The desert's not kind to humans either.
Paul will take his Fremen name from the Muad'Dib, the mouse that can survive in the desert. The Fremen will harvest the power of the mighty sandworm against those who would oppose them. During their meeting, the Reverend Mother warns Paul that an animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. Perhaps human beings are even easier to trap. They construct elaborate systems and structures to contain themselves. Dune is a story of schemes within schemes. The Emperor builds a trap to eliminate Duke Leto. The Bene Gesserit mastermind a breeding program going back generations in the hope of manifesting a messiah who can control mankind. With all of this scheming and politicking, it can be hard to keep track, to see the bigger picture within these larger structures that constrain these characters. As much as Villeneuve and Fraser communicate scale, there are multiple scenes in the movie where characters try to converse through mist and fog, literally unable to see the person to whom they are talking. Even during the daytime and later in the harsh light of Arrakis, characters are often couched in shadow and shot in silhouette. It's not the most subtle of visual metaphors, but it works. As deadly as animals can be, human beings are perhaps more dangerous. It's not just because they build systems that they cannot control, it's because humanity breaks those already dangerous systems. Paul was only born because his mother broke her promise to the Bene Gesserit and gave Leto a son rather than a daughter, undermining generations of planning to produce a celestial messiah. The Harkonnen are only able to massacre the Atreides because they can break the imperial programming of the family's doctor by using his beloved wife as a hostage. In this big empty world, love isn't empowering, it's terrifying. These are big ideas. They're central to what Dune is about, a cosmic tragedy about characters caught between their animal impulses and their human desires. Smart enough to build the unimaginably vast systems and structures that will trap them, but also unpredictable enough to shatter those already horrifying systems with even more terrifying results. Villeneuve and Fraser are able to communicate a lot of these ideas visually, both in what they choose to show the audience and how they choose to present it, their use of light and shadow, what they allow the viewer to see and what they don't. Cinematographer John Alton famously described filmmaking as painting with light. Dune is the work of a director and cinematographer working at the very top of their game, using the strength of their medium to translate a literary classic into film. For decades, Dune was considered unadaptable, as demonstrated by unrealized attempts by filmmakers like Alejandro Jodorowsky or admirable but flawed efforts by artists like David Lynch. The density of the material was always an issue. How do you communicate what this story is about without suffocating the audience in voiceover, monologues, or exposition?
What's the photo for?
It's a recommendation.
This is the girl. What girl? For what? What is this, Ray?
Villeneuve and Fraser have accomplished something truly incredible. They've crafted not only a skillful adaptation, but one that uses the language of its own medium to express the ideas of the source novel. They've used the scale of blockbuster filmmaking not just to wow the audience into submission, but to underscore their key thematic points. They've painted a masterpiece. Dune is not just big, it's beautiful. I've been Darren Mooney, and this was The Backdrop.
Are you a fan of Alien, The Thing, or True Detective Night Country? Want a chilling story to listen to on those cold winter nights? Then you need to tune into The White Vault, a fully voiced horror fiction podcast from the folks at Fool and Scholar Productions. The award-winning found-footage show centers around an international rescue and repair team sent to discover the source of a mysterious signal at a remote Arctic research station. The weather takes a turn for the worse, the team becomes trapped, and you guessed it, spookies ensue. Check out The White Vault, available for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe now and discover the unimaginable horrors that await beneath the ice.